Hello, my name is Mark Gibson, and you're listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, a weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming.
Good morning, and you're very welcome to this morning's Signpost webinar. My name is Pat Murphy, Head of Environment Knowledge Transfer with Teagasc, and the series is brought to you in conjunction with National Rural Network, Food Drink Ireland SkillNet, and Dairy Sustainability Ireland. This morning, we're coming to you from Johnstown Castle, or a couple of us are anyway, and we're delighted to be joined by Catherine Keena, who will help us with the questions, and Edward Byrne. Edward is a marine engineer by training, spent a number of years in that world, and then began a business supplying I suppose materials to support the renovation and maintenance of heritage buildings, and is in more recent times involved in the supply of lime for I suppose the maintenance of heritage buildings.
Good morning and thank you.
And we're also joined this morning by Dr. David Wall here in Johnstown Castle. David, you're going to talk to us just for a minute about an open day that's going to be taking place here in Johnstown Castle in the next couple of weeks.
Good morning all, good morning Pat, and thanks for the introduction and the opportunity, I suppose, to promote, I suppose, our open day. So the open day will take place Tuesday week, so the 30th of August, Tuesday the 30th of August, and the gates will open at 10 a.m. and close at 3 or 4 a.m. or 4 p.m. as as people pass through the open day. So there'll be plenty to see here. As you're all aware, there's many challenges out there currently for farming, on, I suppose, the input side, but also on the environmental side. So we will have all the technologies that are ready for adoption on farms today, and those technologies that are in the pipeline for tomorrow will be available. The big challenge, I suppose, in recent times has been the greenhouse gas and the emissions reductions target for the sector. So we will have plans and technologies there that farmers can adopt on their farms to prepare themselves for reducing emissions into the future. Things like biodiversity, how to prepare your farm and enhance the biodiversity value and the nature value of your farm, while still making a profit, using your nutrients better, managing your swards and your animals. So those technologies will be front and center in the open day. There'll be much more besides, I suppose, the latest work there on multi-species swards on the dairy herd, also the winter milk for those involved in liquid milk. We will have dairy cow nutrition for the winter milk herd, and the dairy beef systems also on multi-species swards there. Come and find out what the latest information is in terms of those systems. The Signpost program will be peppered throughout the open day, and obviously come and find out also about the new acre scheme.
So it's fair to say, I think anybody who's either interested from the perspective of what's the latest research we're doing, what are the technologies that are ready to be implemented on farm, the advisory support that's there in terms of doing it, and then seeing the systems that are in place and looking at best practice here on the farm in Johnstown Castle will all be on display.
That's it, Pat. And look at it, it'll be a day for all farmer enterprises. Although grassland focused, there'll still be something there for a tillage farmer. We're in a tillage area, so they're more than welcome to come. And obviously the schools are back that week, but if there is students there, even students going back to secondary school transition year, or prospective students going back to third level, the farmers of the future, they need to get informed and are more than welcome to come to the open day.
And just to remind us of the date again.
The date is Tuesday the 30th of August, and the gates will open at 10 a.m.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for that. And again, what we will try to do is for all the people who have signed up for the Signpost webinar, we'll send you out a flyer just to invite you to it. we see it very much as a continuation of the work we're trying to do with this webinar. It's a bringing of a lot of what we've been trying to do over the last couple of years together into one big presentation. So good luck with that, David, and we'll see you on the day.
Thanks, and hopefully we'll see everybody there.
Okay, back to you, Edward. And again, you might just describe some of the work you do in relation to all our buildings and heritage buildings. And I suppose just to mention the reason, or the main reason you're here, is we're in Heritage Week, where we're trying to focus on, I suppose, built and natural heritage in our rural environments. And I think you play a major role in relation to supporting that.
Good morning and welcome everybody. Edward Byrne is my name. I run the traditional line company, own and run with my wife, traditional line company. I started life as a marine engineer, and then when my wife and I settled down, I gave it up, and I was salvaging old buildings with a view to actually building a traditional building myself, or restoring one. And I just stayed at that and expanded that in 1980, and we've been at it ever since. And we then did our own house with lime in about 84, and we have been selling lime, but it became our major sale in the late 90s when we got the agency for French hydraulic lime, because there was no maker of hydraulic lime in Britain or Ireland at that stage. So
and I think you mentioned to us you would have seen, I suppose, a renewed interest through the REP scheme in relation to traditional farm buildings. And
that's a very good. That's actually one of the best schemes in that, is the one that's administered through REPs, and that where farm buildings, which is, you know, for small farm buildings, is one of the better of the schemes, because it involves local builders, local tech, you know, because in major conservation it tends to be bigger firms, you know, international or not national tendering and that, but the local ones are by far the best, because that's what you see when you're.
So you have a presentation with us. If you're ready to go with that, if you want to share your presentation, and I think it's very pictorial, and it'll give a very nice view of some of the work that's been done around the country.
This is a presentation that was originally done for, I think, Heritage Week for Carlow County Council years ago. And basically, most of the buildings in this are within about an 80-mile radius of Carlow, Carlow, Kildare, the east coast. But it's just to show that the variety of building materials that were used and where they were used. But my real interest is in traditional building and methods. I'm typecast into lime. I'm like the actor who has to play the good cop or the bad cop. People tend to think now of me as lime, but the reality is lime is a fairly boring subject, while building materials are very interesting because of their origins, etc., and the reasons. Anyway, just a lot of mistakes. A lot of people think of tradition, belief, or custom, but vernacular, the ordinary building materials of a district or country. Conserve is to keep from harm. Conservation means minimal intervention. People talk about conservation, but they don't understand. It's totally different from restoration, which is bring back the original state, or refurbish. A lot of people who tell you they're doing conservation restoration, they're actually just refurbishing the building. It's not quite the same thing. And then you get this comment of protected building. Well, I'm sure this man thinks he's living in a protected structure, but it's not a protected structure as in accordance to the government. Well, this building looks like a protected structure, but I know this man covered it in topsoil to stop people robbing the bricks. Slightly different form of protection. While this is a genuine protected structure, now made last in Wexford, where they put a shed over it because the roof was about to collapse. And it was very practical. By putting the shed over it, they could work away regardless of the weather. They could actually hang the remaining amount of the roof until they studied the building, which is dangerous inside. So they protected, and then they sold the shed off. So it was a very practical move to preserve this. And that's the finished building. Now, on the right hand of the screen, it looks as if there's damage to the corner. That's the wall of the garden, which hadn't been restored at that stage. It was made last in the. And then this is a building that should have been protected, but while they were all fighting over it, this is what happened. So you see, protection doesn't help. The building was protected, but nobody did anything about it. Here's a man who was trying to protect his building by sticking any bit of a slate in to keep it, but gave up in the end. Another protected but his protection failed in the end. It's now gone, this building. This is just to illustrate how Ireland, the bottom half and the top half of Ireland are basically granite and sandstones, and the centre, the blue section, the light blue section, that's the limestone that is in the centre of Ireland. So, and in fact, you hear people saying they got matching stone from Cavan or somewhere to match. The reality is that's no more. In fact, if you really wanted matching stone, you'd probably be better to go to Spain, because the bottom half of Ireland has more in common with, in geological terms, with Spain, and the top half with Scandinavia. But yet, even, just because it just shows how the materials are not necessarily, they're local now, but they weren't local billions of years ago. And I'm apt to say this, you see, people talk about every slate in Ireland is described as a blue Bangor slate. Well, Bangor was there. And of course, they were shipped. Shipping was much easier. It was easier to bring stuff across the Irish Sea than it was to bring it 30 or 40 miles inland, until the advent of the canals, which changed everything. And there are thousands of different, or not thousands, there's a lot of different slates, and everybody described it as Bangor, but they're not. If they came out of Bangor, the port of Bangor, they were quarried in Blano Festiniog and the mountain there. And if they came through Bangor, they were purpley blue. And if they came from the other side of the mountain, they were grey blue, and they were called Port Maddox. But they both came from the same mountain, just literally hundreds of yards apart. These are Glaslacken slate, common around Bunclody. It's just outside Bunclody, Glaslacken slate. Quite small, beautiful little slate, but very difficult, very slow to work with. These are a Henny slate from the slate quarries of Henny, where the famous High Cross is down near there, just below between Kilmaganny and Carrick-on-Shore. These are Kilcavan slate. These quarries were opened by the Fitzwilliam estate, by Lord Fitzwilliam, who had between 70 and 90,000 acres in the Wicklow, Carlow, North Wexford area. And they had a modest house in England, Worth House. It was only 690 foot long. It's the longest facade of any building in Europe, they reckon, a private house. It's actually longer than Buckingham Palace. These are Kilcavan slates again. That's just outside Carnew. This roof is outside Shalala, but the quarry was just outside Carnew. These are Henny slates on our own house. These actually came off the church in Dunnamaggin when it was demolished, and we used them on our own house. These are Westmoreland green slates. These are on a concrete built house in the west of Ireland in 1911, but just to illustrate. And they were also used in Christchurch Cathedral, the most expensive slate in the world that now still are, I think, Westmoreland greens. These are Valentia slate. Now, Valentia slate was used on the House of Parliament and the shelves of the British Library as a sawn slate. And I think originally might have been used in the White House, which was designed by an Irish architect called Hoban from just outside Callan. These are a modern Spanish slate. You see, there's no life to these. Look, you look at the roof and it's dead. There's nothing wrong as a roof, but they just have no life, while the traditional slates have a lovely life to make a building look completely different. Now, these slates in Geishel, as you can see, these all came from the same quarry, because different beds or layers of the quarry were different. So you've got this polychromatic slating, coloured slate put in to emphasise. You get it more common on church roofs than on this. This is called Scotch slating, an economical way of slating and giving you ventilation, because generally slate roofs were actually torched or parged on the back. They had lime mortar put on the back, which was the original, for want of a better word, breathable felt, shall we say. A very good idea, but very difficult to do in modern building. These are Killaloo slates on a new building near Clonegall in County Carlow. Oh, so it's repeating somehow. And this is weather slating. And the important thing to remember about weather slating, if you ever redo it, it's the slates are turned upside down. It's the one they're turned the opposite way than you would put them on a roof. This is a repaired side of a building in Castlecomer. And you can see where the repaired slates are not quite, but they'll weather into the same colour. They're held on with lime mortar and a nail driven into them, and you often got these decorative elements. And this is in Clonmel, on the quay in Clonmel. And then, of course, you had thatched roofs, and the variety of types of thatch were more or less local to districts. The method of thatching, I think, and of course the material used, everything from flax to straw to reed, and depending. Reed wasn't as common around here. Well, it was on the Wexford down where you had reed beds. These are just thatched roofs around Ireland or within an area. That's actually up in Cavan, Gartland's pub. That's in Tipperary, that one there. The rounded gable was quite common in Tipperary. That's a Donegal thatch, I think, actually, but they're completely rounded roof. And this is the inside, and just use hedgerow timber. Just split and put up and scraw then from the the top of a bog or top of the sod was put on top, and then the thatch was laid straight on top of that. This is in Kilkenny. This is Jimmy Lenihan. He's a well-known thatcher. His own house in Kilkenny. This style of roofing really wouldn't have been common in Ireland. These are Bridgewater tiles. Again, you see, because it was easier to ship stuff from Bridgewater in Somerset down the Bristol Channel. And then these are protocol known as Bridgewater, double Roman Bridgewater tiles they're called. And this is a gate lodge with the flat little pan tiles. It's a gate lodge on the Fitzwilliam estate. It's between Shillelagh and Tinnahealy, a bit unknown because it's down the side road. And that's that gate is the traditional Fitzwilliam Collaton gate, which has round there. These bars are round timber. They're not square. They're actually round timber. Very traditional, lovely gate, beautiful gate. They used to be everywhere on the Collaton estate. That's on the Lansdowne estate. They're Bridgewater again, but they're slightly different. These again, and these tiles are zigzag pattern. They're not rounded, or it doesn't show up very well in the photograph. And that's in Stradbally, County Laois. That's an original corrugated iron roof. There's no evidence that building ever had. So that probably dates from 1860s. There's no evidence that building ever had any earlier roof on it. The roof looks to have been made for the original building, which is actually in our own farmyard, where we live. There's the sheet iron used in the same manner as you'd use lead, and roll top on it. Again, another method of doing that. And it was quite common around Milford, the estate in Milford, the Alexanders. Their main house was done in this, and all the gate lodges and all the estate lodges were done this way as well. Typical on a clay building, which is common. That's in Kildare. That's up Wicklow. Again, modern use of galvanized iron on the building. And this is a very early hay shed or barn, and you can see the date on it there, 1889, and used in railway tracks. Was it out near Wallslock in Kilkenny? And that's Orglin in Orglin. That mansard roof was on Orglin, standing on cast iron pillars, and I don't know whether you can see in the picture the stressed beams with under the floor with the tension rods on them, and just some other galvanized. And then Portlaw, you see, was at Malcolmson's, and they this is a view of Portlaw where the original building had rounded roofs and were covered in felt using a type of Belfast, what they call a Belfast truss, with their felt. And the Malcolmsons were very prominent mills in Portlaw. And they were into ship building and ship owning as well in Waterford. And of course, you're always told that in building, they used to put the big stones at the bottom. Well, anybody who knows Borris, the Borris men don't do anything the same as anybody else, as everybody knows from the fair day in Borris. But anyway, see how they're very big. Some of the stones are 3 foot across in that wall in Borris. This is traditional Carlow walling, to use with split granite. The Carlow farmers or Carlow stonemasons had a reputation of being able to split granite better than anybody else. And they split up to 10 and 12 foot lengths of granite. And that's the wall of the Brownshill estate, which is, if you talk to people, they'll tell you it's a granite wall or a limestone wall, because it starts as limestone at one end near Carlow, and by the time it gets out to Bennykerry, it's all granite. And in the middle, it's mixed stone. They used what was available. That's a Wexford wall. typical Wexford wall down below Bunclody, between Bunclody and Enniscorthy. That'd be very common. And then once the railways came, it really, the canals first, and then the railways changed. So that's the Thomastown railway station. You see, it was easy bring materials because the trains were coming anyway. And in fact, you could buy gate posts for 50 shillings a pair, delivered to practically any railway station in Ireland from some of the railways. And they were mainly limestone or granite gate posts, single piece, sent by rail. You could have them delivered by rail, and that's where you get all these one-piece granite or limestone posts. And that's a chimney up near Wolf Hill, or not quite went out to Swan, but that's not what people think. It's a ventilation shaft for a mine underneath. You see, it's not actually. The idea was, and if the ventilation was bad, they lit a fire at the bottom, but only to draw the air up through the mine. It wasn't a chimney for an industrial purpose. It was actually a ventilation shaft for a mine. And 50, I give €50 to anybody who can tell me what this building, well, and this would be difficult for you to, what stone this building is built from. It's actually early concrete block, the Carnegie Library in Kilkenny. It's built from in early form concrete block. And that's one of the first concrete bridges in Ireland. And they tested that bridge. I have a photograph somewhere, which I couldn't find in time for this, where they tested it by driving 2 steam engines in opposite directions, having loaded the bridge already with 2 fully loaded trailers behind the steam engines across it. On the bridge, it's just under Kilkenny Castle, the main bridge in Kilkenny. It's one of the first concrete bridges in Ireland. And this is Lismore Castle. And why I show this is to show that you could spend the rest of your life looking for matching stone to repair this. And in fact, you won't find it, because the stone for the windows, dressings, were brought in by the bachelor Duke from his quarries in Derbyshire. And he even more or less canalized or made a river into a canal to get the stone up there. And it's one of the few places in the world, or in Ireland, that you get Burlington blue slates, because his second title is Lord Burlington, and he owned the quarries. So they're used up along the Blackwater Valley on his houses, but you won't get them anywhere else. Kylemore Abbey, built of granite imported from Dalkey. Strange may seem, even though that part of the world is full of stone, but they brought in granite from Dalkey to Wicklow to build there. And these are some of the bricks you find. These are bricks I found when in our salvage business. Kept one of them, all different bricks. Note the one there with the big paw print in it. I wouldn't like to have met that dog on a dark night with a paw that big. And those bricks there are not really bricks. They're actually early form of cavity wall tie. And they're the drying floor from a malt drying. They were the floors from malt drying floor. They lit a fire underneath, and the steam went up the malting floor. The air went up to dry the corn. The Aurora brick, just an example of it, it's still there. This is how bricks were made in clamps, just traditionally just made in clamps. That's an early Georgian brick house in Carlow. You wouldn't expect brick in Carlow. That's a Victorian brick house just outside Naas. And that's down between near Corracloe, actually, that building. And that was the Hempelstall family, where the famous thing is, here lie the bones of Hempelstall, judge, jury, hangman, gallows, rope and all. He used to hang people over his shoulder during 1798. And note that the traditional mortars contain very big pieces of aggregate. This is one of the problems we have now, is getting an aggregate to look right in a repair, because you can't get really coarse sands as they originally used. Carlow railway station, which if you go to it now looks like a yellow brick railway station, but in fact originally would have, as you can see, the bricks would have been coloured. They were actually covered with a colouring to make them look, it would have looked like a red brick railway station originally, and something more like this, where it was emphasised. But this is what would have looked like originally, even though the background bricks are yellow, because it was fashionable to have with yellow brick. Red brick were expensive. So this is called tuck pointing, bastard tuck, or Wigan pointing, depending on the type way it's done. Tuck pointing is more common in Britain. Bastard tuck or Wigan is more common in Ireland. This is how it's done, line out and straight up, finished product. This is how you shouldn't point a brick building, but anyway. That's the inside of a dovecote done with brick up in County Kenny. It's near Ballyragget. And here is the correct use of concrete. Used as a springer. This is about a 1911 building where they would have normally used a piece of stone made effectively a springer. And of course the sill is early concrete, because one of the first concrete or cement works in Ireland was actually in Wexford. A ship captain's house, a Swedish ship captain's house in Wexford, with a white brick, the tile, imported tile, and all done with pitch pine throughout. This is Code Stone. This is halfway, I can't remember the name of the churchyard, but it's about halfway between Enniscorthy and Wexford on the west side of the Slaney. In memorial in a thing, it's called Code Stone. It's actually really a type of terracotta, but there was a patent by Mrs. Code called Code Stone. This is Roman cement used in the as decoration. That's on Burris House. It was invented by the Reverend Parker in the 1790s, and it looked the same colour as the Roman mortar they were finding in Roman remains of Britain, so he called it Roman cement for that. But it sets in 3 to 5 minutes, a quick-setting natural cement. It actually is the ultimate in hydraulic lime. That's what it actually is. It's the ultimate in a hydraulic lime. These are cornerstones made of it in Carlow, pier in Clahaman, pier in Dublin, in Monkstown in Dublin. It's always the colour of chocolate except for white. Light brown to dark brown to quite reddish brown. That's the inside of a bread oven in Cappoquin, Barron's Bakery. I'd recommend anybody to go there for their bread. It's absolutely delicious. And this is what happens when you use cement to point the building. You can see the salts coming out. The salts have destroyed the face of the brick. The pointing in this building probably had failed, and somebody said, I'll solve that. I'll put a good, strong, hard cement. And of course, it's ruined the brick. It's easy to repoint a building. Not easy, but it's a lot easier than to replace all those brick. That was a public toilet just as you go into Rathmines, or Rathmines, more or less, in Dublin. Templeogue, actually, yes. Rathmines. And this is what happens when you use cement on a building again. The decay. This building was plastered from there up to there. And they salts then from the cement capillary rise up. It was plastered to stop the rising damp. All it did was drive it higher up. And of course, the salts then damage the stone. This is the other side of that building where the cement is still on it and where the damage is done to the stone by what they thought was doing the right thing. In fact, it's completely. Kylemore Abbey, the church, looks grand. You go up close and you see the leaching, which means that water is getting in and can't get right back out or just coming out through the thing. Inside then, all the salts appearing inside because it's been pointed with a hard impervious cement material. And you got this, and this is what you have. The salts then all appearing inside. The mortar on the outside should be sacrificial and breathable, more important. And of course, this phenomena of here's it by the concrete blocks, because the leaching, when ordinary cement sets, Portland cement sets, it releases up between 7 and 13% lime in the setting action. So this is why you get this leaching of, even from concrete block, or that's of lime, which people blame on the lime mortar, but it's happened to these blocks and they never saw a bit of lime mortar. A damp in a building where the material to the right is a coat of cement was put on, and when we hacked the plaster off, it was actually physically damp, and the other side of the wall was physically damp just because of trapped moisture. There's no such thing, strictly speaking, as rising damp. It's trapped moisture. If you allow the moisture get away on the outside, it won't interfere with you. This is the phenomenon you get on chimneys, where the chimney, you can say, has got slightly banana shape. The reason being the salts from the burning of the sulfates, coal, kind of sulfur. The salts are coming out through the chimney. On one side, they get washed away by the rain, on the prevailing wind and rain side. On the other side or not, they stay there and they expand, and they make the mortar expand and push the chimney over. And you can see them quite banana shaped in some cases. It's all caused by the salts from the fireplaces. My daughter, who studied veterinary in Budapest and is a equine vet here in Ireland now, she sent me this about Venice, went to visit Venice when she was studying in Budapest, but it doesn't tell you on this poster the same company supplied the mortar that caused the dampness. But anyway, now this is where into flexibility of lime mortars. I'm probably starting to go over time here, but flexibility of lime mortars. If you could see where that's in the next slide, you can see where it's dropped. And the brick has all flexed. It's curved down, including the sill is curved the other way, because the mortar is flexible. If that was a cement mortar, there would have been a major crack. And there's other examples of the difficult to see in a small slide, but where the building has settled and the lime mortar accommodates the settlement. You see that. Now, all the materials in this shopping basket or trolley contain lime. They all contain lime, including the trolley, because it takes virtually a ton of lime to make a ton of steel. The average car has a ton of lime in it in some way or other. So the biggest user of lime is actually the steel industry, is one of the biggest users, and also the scrubbing of exhaust gases from power stations, now coal-fired power stations, not conservation, restoration, or building. That's an old lime kiln. That's in Wexford. They're the original Clogrennan lime kilns. This is a modern Clogrennan lime called a Mertz kiln. It works on the principle of as one is burning, the other is heating up, and then the changeover and the empty one starts. And this is the sugar factory kiln, which is still there. And the sugar factory had the potential they made up 100 tons of lime a day. It was one of the largest producer in Ireland when it was there. Of course, they had another kiln in Mallow, another one in Tuam, but this one left in Carlow is still standing, actually, this kiln. That's the inside of a lime kiln while burning. You shouldn't by right see the burning because you're losing heat. The most important thing is to conserve the heat because it's more fuel, but this is just where they're moving down. These are the different classes of lime used and what their breathability, but how to make up lime mortar. Richard Neve wrote about how to make a proper lime mortar. This is that method being practiced on site in a demonstration with a man called Henry Thompson on the left and myself on the right. This is the mortar being mixed up. This is George O'Malley making up a lime putty, which is used for skimming plasters and stuff like that inside. And this is a Ladies' Island in Wexford. We supplied the lime to restore the church behind, but the tower is lying over, and that proves that it was a hydraulic lime because non-hydraulic lime has no tensile strength. So it would have come down if it wasn't. This is one of the earliest pieces on bridges done by Semple. Semple was an expert on hydraulic lime in Ireland, and he built this bridge, Essex Bridge in Dublin, and wrote extensively on it. There's a few examples of lime mortars where they're used, old lime mortars. Then the different limes you get are white rhino, which is non-hydraulic lime, hydrated lime, but non-hydraulic, and used for like lime washing all these buildings, and used, well, that building and the inside of it. That's the building before and after. Can be used in inside work, on ceilings. And then the next is non-hydraulic lime and NHL2. NHL2 means natural hydraulic lime 2, and 2 is its setting strength in a standard concrete test. It has to set to 2 newtons in 28 days to qualify. This is also used, that's been used in a ceiling in our own house on Latin plaster. That's, again, the cornice being run in it in our own house. It's a straw bale building up in Sligo, which has a coat of clay on first to level the straw out, and then plaster with hydraulic lime. That's the Adjutant General's house at Kilmainham, at the Royal Hospital, done with an NHL2. The Weaver's Cottage in Clonegall, they have glass-lacking, a mixture of glass-lacking and Killaloo slates or Henny slates on it, and the building itself done. Then the next is the normal. It would be the normal lime used. NHL 3.5 would be, it's the equivalent of the Toyota Corolla, the high AS van of lime. It'll do just about anything if correctly used. That's our training centre we built with. That's all done with NHL 3.5. That's a new building done with it, an old building done with it. And this is a building that was done down in Clare. It was featured in Country Living magazine. That's the finished building, completely derelict since 1860, brought back. And interesting enough, his heating bills, even though there's no insulation in the walls and everything, is not any more than a normal house. That's our own house. When we started, it was a full-size tree grow in the middle with 2.5 walls. And that's it now. They're the Henny slates on the roof. That's that's one of the lodges up on the Wicklow. It's up on the Wicklow Gap. I can't remember the name of it now. That was a dovecote to the Rathfarnham Castle with lime sprayed on. It was sprayed on lime. That's in the war. That's the Land League house that's in Wingap. There's a church on where it's meant. It was very damp and they wanted to try it. Done in lime, it's dry. And then the strongest lime is an NHL5. We used generally below ground level or above parapet level, provided the host masonry is strong enough to take it. And it's the best for there. Best like lighthouses, that's a lime concrete floor. No need for expansion joints. Lime is very flexible, so there's no need for an expansion joint. You can build a stone wall from here to America, no expansion joints. If you use lime, that's a castle. And you get this patching, which proves that the lime is working because it's pulling the moisture out of the wall, which leaves a stain. But the stain usually wears off after a couple of years. This is a castle on just outside Galway, on the Headford Road. This is the lime washes then. This is pink lime wash. That's at the Ballymaloo Cookery School. That's pink lime wash on a house, in an old house in Wicklow. Quite red and pink were reddish. So they were quite common in this area and in East Cork in particular. While Limerick was very much yellow. That's actually in Ballytor. That's on the Waterford Kilkenny border. Again, you see often there was yellow lime wash. It was that whatever pigment was available locally, and most of the pigments that's actually in Limerick, Kilmallock, that's in Wicklow, Waterford Cathedral, Jeremy Irons Castle. He was our biggest client ever for lime in one go. 27 tons of lime he took to do that castle. And these are where the pigments are sourced. These are from the mines in Avoca. You can still get the pigments from there. Well, you can't. I mean, you still get them, but they're not commercially available. These are modern. We use commercially available pigments now. Is by a full range of pigments. That's the drawing room of our own house. That's done with a mineral paint, which you saw earlier. And let's just use this to illustrate. In Scotland, the roofers actually did the rough cast, as they're calling, or dashing of houses, not plasterers, because it was considered a protective layer to keep the rain out, the same as a roof. That's a hood fireplace, and in the next slide it'll show you that it's actually made with wattle and daub. You can see, I'm pointing at it. See, it's actually wattle and daub and clay, then covered with a lime wash. And sometimes they were just made out of timber boards, heavily lime washed to make them, relatively speaking, fireproof. This is a well-furnished drawing room in Kilkenny, on the road in Kilkenny one day. And a lot of this information that will come from this, the Practical Geology and Architecture of Ireland. This is Mr. Wilkinson. I think I'm going over my time at this stage. Wrote a very good thing. He was the architect for the workhouses. Extremely well built, and a lot of the information is in these. Anybody wants to get that, I'll just run through. So, was in Kenny before and after again. How timber is done, correctly done, sawn for the best results. This is a job we did where we hand worked, squared this log by hand, and built a building. That's my bald head there. I had still got some black hair either side, but now it's all gone grey. A couple of years ago, proper access to do it, pit sawing. And this is a job we did a training course for the OPW in Kilkenny. And I think we've reached the end. Thank God, says everybody.
I know. I think absolutely fascinating. I think people are just amazed by the amount of information. And I suppose one of the things that strikes me is we probably don't know how much we don't know in relation to this whole area. And I suppose no more than the whole skill around thatching, the whole skill set around knowing what to do in relation to mortars and limes. It's an old skill and probably one that needs to be brought back into prominence if we're going to effectively. I have to use the right word now that you've described all the words, but renovate or maintain the building stock that we have. You might stop sharing there as well, Edward.
Sorry, what do I? Oh, sorry, not again. Interesting. The man Semple who built the bridge in Dublin made probably the best statement ever made about lime. He said the only water you should add to lime is the sweat of the workmen. In other words, plenty of mixing. And I mean, people give out now and say, "Oh, I'm not doing that." You don't have to. Mr. Briggs and Stratton or Mr. Hondel do the sweating for you. Just go off and leave the thing in the mixer for longer. That's all. That's all. In fact, that's the big secret of lime is the good mixing.
I just remind people if you have questions for Edward, just to use the Q&A. There's questions starting to come in there, Catherine.
Yeah. And again, simple questions, but what's the difference between hydraulic and hydrated lime, Edward? Can you explain?
All limes except quicklime are hydrated. When you burn the rock, you get quicklime, what's called quicklime or lump lime. And when you add water to it and it falls to a powder, you've got a hydrated lime. It goes from calcium oxide to calcium hydroxide. But some of them are non-hydraulic. Hydraulic limes are limes that contain silicas or aluminates, and the best hydraulic limes are based on the silicates. And they create impurity. See, the demand in the world is mainly for pure limes for industry, but while for building demanded non-impure limes, but hydrated lime. It's like saying just because you have a Rover doesn't mean it's four-wheel drive. You know, hydraulic limes are four-wheel drive lime. They'll do, and you know, it's a different. It contains an impurity that sets both with and under water. Hydraulic lime means that it sets both with and under water. Once you mix a hydraulic lime, it's going to set. The degree of set will be different for different strengths. But if you mix an ordinary lime from Clogrennan, which is a very good lime, by the way, Clogrennan lime is extremely pure, good lime for its purpose, it'll never set. If you left it under water in a bucket, it would never, ever set. In 1,000 years, it'll still be usable, provided it's kept underwater, kept wet. While if you mix a hydraulic lime up, it'll set to some degree. It might only set as hard as a soft soap, but it will set to some degree, and you cannot knock it back up again.
What mortar would you advise for an old mill race that is now dry?
An NHL5 would be, because below ground level in water conditions, an NHL5 would be the one you'd use. Or clay, it can be puddling clay either, depending on the type of mill race. If it's a mill race that's just in the ground, with not built in stone, then you use a clay, a puddling clay. You wouldn't use a lime at all.
Where can you source quicklime for mixing and slaking yourself?
Well, from Clogrennan or from us, we supply it, but wouldn't be used under normal circumstances for building. You wouldn't normally use it for building purposes. Now, there are a lot of people out there telling people that you can use it, and of course you can, because in fact, building ordinary stone walls, all the mortar is doing is stopping them from, rocking, because the reality is stone wall correctly built, dry would work. But it depends on where you use it.
Why wouldn't you use them, Edward? Why wouldn't you use quicklime?
Well, maybe I should have put this, which quicklime, because you can have a hydraulic quicklime as well as a non-hydraulic quicklime. Yes, but we will supply people with hydraulic quicklime in bulk if they want it. But we wouldn't advise using it because it takes a lot more skill. Now, a non-hydraulic quicklime is very easy to use, but it will not set enough except for internal work and/or very rough work.
Okay. What mix would you recommend for limecrete floor?
2.5, minimum of 2.5 to 1 of an NHL5. If it's going to take traffic and be used floor, probably 2 to 1. But again, it depends on which of the limes you're using, because no two natural hydraulic limes from two manufacturers are the same. So it would depend, strictly speaking, on lime. A lime specification should be specific to a make of lime, because they all have different characteristics. It's like going out to buy a car. Somebody says you should buy a 2-litre car. Well, you wouldn't just buy a 2-litre car if you're going to pull a horse box. You'd want a 4-wheel drive 2-litre. Wouldn't just be 2-litre wouldn't be enough to tell you should what to use. And if it's a high performance. There are high performance and low performance, all coming from not from the same manufacturer, but from different manufacturers, because they're natural products. You see, they're natural hydraulic limes. They're not allowed. The people who make it are not allowed to change anything except the fuel and the burning time.
How do you repair rising damp on internal walls?
First, do away with the source of moisture, if at all possible. But also, whatever you do, don't plaster the outside or inside with cement, because all that to do will make the moisture rise higher, because the moisture can't get out, so therefore it rises. If you put a concrete block in water at the end of it, stand it upright, put the concrete block, the moisture will rise 2 or 3 inches. If you wrap the same block in plastic, the moisture will rise 9 or 10 inches, or even up to the very top of the block, depending on making the block. If you trap moisture, a waterproof membrane is something that turns good water into bad water. You've got to let the moisture out and prevent it getting in by using a lime plaster or lime render on the outside, which has resistance to water penetration, but is highly breathable. Lime is exactly the same to you as cotton or wool is to you, and cement is the nylon. I mean, well, I'm not sure you're old enough to remember the drip dry nylon shirt. Who's wearing one now? That's what nylon is, and basically hydraulic lime in its setting action forms a very dense but breathable surface, which is resistant to water going. It's like the mesh in a cattle shed, the mesh they use to stop the rain blowing cattle shed. Unless the wind is really blowing hard against that, water won't come through it. It runs off it. It's the same with a hydraulic lime, but at the same time, it acts as a breathable membrane to allow the moisture, wick the moisture back out of the thing. But it must be touching the wall. You see, we go to buildings and they have a lime render on it, but the house is damp. We discovered the lime render is all hollow because it's not actually touching the wall to pull the moisture back out. It's like if you hang a wick into a lamp and it's not touching the oil, you won't get oil to light the wick. It has to have something to wet it to come up to allow it. It acts like a wick and takes the water back out of the wall.
Edward, you've sold the lime mortar so well. We have somebody with a garage, so I'm assuming it's a modern block, cement block garage, and wondering, do they put lime mortar on that, or are we only talking about traditional buildings?
Strictly speaking, we can give them a mortar with a cement and mix. The problem with cement is that builders think if 1 shovel of cement is good, 2 is even better. 3 will get us out at 4 o'clock, 4 gets out at lunchtime. You see, it's not the cement itself isn't the problem. It's the density of the mix, and you can actually make a mix with cement and lime, which is as breathable as lime. But it hasn't done away with the salts in the cement. Now, in the concrete block, you've already got cement, it makes no difference. But you wouldn't use a cement-based mortar on an old building because the salts in the cement can damage the host masonry.
But the other way around, Edward, on the cement wall, the cement block wall, is there any advantage in using lime mortar on that?
Well, of course, I sell it. What do you think? I would say. No, there is an event, but but we have a HL5, which would be perfect for that. It's a hydraulic lime, not a natural hydraulic lime, which has a tiny amount of cement to make it easier to use. And but not for conservation.
But the real message, the clear message here this morning, and I know from dealing with farmers and advisors that everybody doesn't understand it, as Pat said, but the traditional buildings need lime mortar, traditional stone buildings. That's the clear message, isn't it?
Yeah, they should have lime mortar.
That's really good.
I mean,
are there any traditional building materials or techniques used in Irish buildings which are still mysteries or difficult to replicate?
Not really. No, it's there's not. The problem. People are so used to working with instant working materials like Tech 7 and expanding foam and everything else. You have to take your time with lime. It takes time. It's not the cost of the lime. I mean, in a lime plastering job, the lime itself is only about maximum 6 or 8% of the actual thing. Now that's double what it would cost if you use cement. But it's the time. It's timing the work. You see, you can't. To do a lime plastering job, it's 4 to 7 days between coats, while it's usually just 1 day between cement coats. By right, it should be longer, but people don't leave it that long. 4 to 7 days. And so you can't go in with a gang of people and do the whole building out. If you want to go in, you have to have another job to go to.
Pat, before I come back to you, can I ask a question myself then?
Yeah, fire ahead.
Of relevance to like advisors, and this was me on the ground meeting farmers, we're the ones that see all these lovely old buildings, not used probably commercially, not going to make a huge amount of money, but what can we say to a farmer? Now, obviously you mentioned the traditional farm building scheme, which was in all the agri-environment schemes and hopefully will be in the new acres, but even in the meantime, before we go, because if you go into the traditional farm building scheme, you get your professional help from from the architect, a traditional building person. But just in general for farmers, what can they do to help keep these buildings for the next generation? Any simple tips?
Just always repair them with lime.
Okay.
And as I said, you can't go wrong really using an NHL 3.5. It's it's the middle of the road lime that will under normal stuff. But all they have to do is send us a picture of what they're doing, and we can usually tell them. Or we can recommend we can see somebody down the road who's used the material. You see, most of our buildings aren't public. Most of our buildings, they're privately owned, and we'd have to then get permission from the thing. One of the biggest enemies of the whole thing is the Facebook and the internet. You see, where people in other countries where they have 6 times less rain are telling people you don't need, you don't need it.
On that one then, apart from the walls, we've got that message loud and clear. Keeping the roof on of some sort, is that important to keep the walls standing?
Oh, yeah.
Even if we can't afford to do the slate one today, is it really important to tell farmers to keep some roof on until it could be done perfectly? Is that important?
Yeah, and never say, if you're talking about walls around gardens or ordinary walls around farmyard, never take the ivy off them until you're prepared to replace it, because 2 things happen. Or never cut something like an ash or a sycamore that's growing unless you're rootlessly prepared to kill it, because the root can grow up to 6 or 7 times in that growing season. And also, if you take the top off a wall, even though it might be only old couch grass growing on top of the wall, it protects the wall from the rain going down into it. It acts like a head of hair. It'll protect some of the rain from going down. While I've seen walls where people cleaned the top off, heavy shower rain in the winter, down into the wall, frost came, literally blew the wall apart. Like, you're better in a lot of cases leaving things alone unless you're actually going to you have to stop that, and don't cut anything like ivy or that unless you're ruthlessly prepared to kill it. And that's they have to go to their Teagasc advisor to find out what's the correct herb. Is it a herbicide? No, anyway, to kill. Because I've seen in our own building, literally our own house when we worked on it, to get a digger around to clean out the site, we had to cut an ash that was growing out at an angle of 45 degrees, and we just cut it. And we left it and went back about 2 years later, and there was a crack in the wall in an outbuilding. You could put your fist into it, and that wasn't there when I ran. But if we hadn't cut the ash, it was grand. But we needed to get past it. You learn by experience, and we have a lot of experience, of dealing with these and seeing what happens if you don't do it right.
Pat, can I just come back to the first
go
question?
ahead.
Sorry, and then I'll hand over to you. Just in case we forget, the first question related back to David and the open day at Johnstown Castle. For advisors, for private advisors, just to know that it will be registered as an IASIS event with IASIS points, and there will be a stand for you to claim your points. So that's very important for private agricultural advisors. It will be an IASIS event. So back to you, Pat.
Yeah, no, and I think I was about to ask a question that you were asking, and I suppose through the schemes, and Catherine, you have I suppose followed the various schemes and the heritage and the restoration schemes. You might give people an idea of what's available now and what you expect to be available in terms of support for people to take on potential projects of restoring farm buildings. Am I putting you on the spot too much?
Are you asking me or Edward?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you've a good bit of experience.
No, we're not sure yet, Pat. I was just trying to find out even, and there's been no mention of it for acres, but hopefully it will be. So that's all we can say.
Yeah. But from our point of view,
sorry, Edward.
From our point of view, like we spend more time advising people than like. If you came tomorrow and sat in our office, you'd be convinced that selling lime was a license to print money. But in reality, you see, remember, you have 5 or 6 contractors pricing a job. Everyone will ring you, and it's the one who gets the job is that spends least time on the phone. The other people want you to practically plaster the building over the phone for them. So it's not. But we have a Vincent here, which is the other side of the computer at the moment. Will be here technically to answer all the questions. Our Frank. And I go out on site and visit people. That's my whole role. I have nothing to do with the day-to-day running of the business. I actually don't even know the price of half our products or most of our products because it doesn't concern me. I can only tell you the right thing to do. It's up to you. I can't. I will not go to a site to sell a product. I'm not there to sell a product because I can tell you the right thing to do. That's all I can do when I get there.
Okay. Listen, I think we're hitting on our time, and really, I think a lot of responses coming back from people really appreciating the talk, finding it absolutely fascinating. It's an area I suppose we probably underrepresent the whole built heritage in our consideration of environmental issues at farm level. I think it's hugely important to protect what we have and I suppose to build in traditional manner. So really, thank you very much for your contribution. And the visual element of the presentation where we saw so much of from the examples that you gave was absolutely fascinating, and I think just grabbed people's attention. So thank you very much for that, Edward. Really appreciate it.
From my point of view, like what I've always said for 20, 30 years, a friend of mine is in tourism, runs a tourist business. If you drive from Dublin to Cork, it's vernacular buildings, you see. There are very few large houses to be seen from a main road. What really gives you the correct impression of what Ireland is about are the vernacular and farmhouse buildings. But we're being led by foreign magazines. Nobody in Ireland is leading people to correct Irish buildings. Why would you want to come from a foreign country to look at a foreign house? Even Irish Georgian buildings, the correct ones, are different than English Georgian buildings. We had a different, even then, to the people who know. You see, like we're turning Ireland into we're copying continental practice, which or British practice. We should be, showing we have a style of building which people want to see. And that's why it's so important that these farms and gates and everything are restored because they're unique to Ireland.
Very good. Listen, thank you again. And just a reminder that next week, Catherine is turning from assistant to main person on the webinar. She'll be talking about best practice for hedgerows. We do now have a huge amount more focus in relation to hedgerows, and anybody who's looking at potentially joining the acre scheme, there are a number of measures in there for hedgerows, but there's also for probably the first time standards being set for the management of all hedgerows within the schemes and within our requirement under cross compliance. So I think you're going to see a much higher focus there. So we'll be beginning Hedgerow Week with the presentation from Catherine on the management of hedgerows next week. Then before I finish, I'd like to thank our production team of Andy Boland and Yvonne Marr, and hopefully we'll see you again next week. Thank you and goodbye.
You've been listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, the weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. Don't forget to join us live every Friday morning for our latest webinar. For more, visit teagasc.ie. And you can also rate, review, and subscribe to the Signpost Series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Mark Gibson, and thanks for listening.